we haven't yet tasted a good pudding. Samir.
Can you tell us anything about the Secretary's meeting with the Foreign Minister of Bahrain? What's the purpose? Is it the commission that postponed the release of the report, or the sale of military equipment? I mean, can you tell us anything?
Yeah, the Secretary met with Sheikh Khalid bin Ahmed Al Khalifa just before I came down, the Foreign Minister of Bahrain. They discussed the full range of issues that we have together, including they had a detailed discussion of the upcoming release of the Bahrain Independent Commission of Inquiry report, and the Foreign Minister assured her that the government would take the report very seriously and would, in fact, establish an implementing committee. And the Secretary obviously underscored our view that this is a very important commission. The fact that it is independent, the fact that its work will be transparent, is not only important for Bahrain, but it's important for the cause of reform throughout that region.
Did she express any concern about the prosecution of doctors who are treating some of the wounded protesters?
She did talk about, they did talk about the full range of human rights issues, including the military trials. As you know, the Bahraini government has now committed to retry those cases in civilian court, and the Secretary underscored how important that is.
Sorry, can you clarify a little bit? You said they did talk about it. Can you explain what her message was with regard to those cases, human rights cases, and the treatment of protesters during the uprising?
Well, she's made very clear throughout, we've made very clear throughout that we had concerns here, that we wanted to see the Bahraini government take action, Commission of Inquiry being one step. Another step that they have now taken is to move these cases, which were tried initially in a military construct, back into civilian court and to commit to retrying them. So these are very important steps, and the Secretary underscored that they need to follow through on them.
And what did they say about the arms sale, proposed arms sale?
You know, we've spoken extensively about the arms sale here before. They obviously talked about it. Foreign Minister's been up on the Hill talking to members of Congress as well. You know, I'll leave it to them to share their view on this, but you know, the Secretary's position hasn't changed. These are this is equipment that we have notified to the Congress for use for the external security of Bahrain, and you know, this speaks to the work that we are trying to do with the Gulf countries, all of them, and you saw this in New York, the GCC plus U.S. forum, to increase interoperability, increase harden the defenses of these countries against external threats. So obviously that conversation was had, but also the Bahrainis know that we have human rights standards attached to these sales, and the actual transfer decisions are pending.
Is the Secretary satisfied with the steps that the government of Bahrain has taken thus far to investigate the allegations of human rights violations in Bahrain over the last 8 months?
Well, I think the thrust of the conversation, the thrust of our message to Bahrain over some months, including when the Crown Prince was here, was that the not only the Bahraini people, but the international community and certainly the United States are waiting eagerly for the release of the results of the Independent Commission of Inquiry, which will be out, we understand, on November 23rd. And that this will really be a litmus test of transparency and accountability for what happened in Bahrain, and particularly how the government chooses to deal with what is reported will also be important.
But it doesn't address the underlying question, which is to say whether the U.S. government believes that, based on its own information, that there were significant, severe human rights violations, and whether her conversation had anything to do with the underlying facts and events that have been reported, including by, you know, NGOs and rights groups. It's almost as if, I'm trying to get at what she may have said about the U.S. government's belief in what actually has transpired, rather than just how the Bahraini government should deal with the allegations, you know, in retrospect. I mean, if you believe that there were human rights violations, is it simply enough that you investigate them later? Or is there not some other message that the U.S. government should perhaps make to its friend and ally about the underlying propriety of human rights violations? So to summarize, do you believe that human rights violations occurred in Bahrain based on the work of the U.S. Embassy? And did the Secretary address the underlying question of any such violations in her conversation with the Foreign Minister today?
Well, again, I don't think that it's any secret that we have had concerns, which is why we both encouraged and supported an independent investigation, which Bahrain has undertaken. It is the first time that they have done such a thing, so it sends a very good signal. This investigation, we hope, will speak not only to individual incidents, but also to systemic changes that can be made to prevent future such abuses. And we will look not only for a full, transparent, independent report, but also for the government to take steps to redress shortcomings that are found. So that's the thrust of the conversation that we've been having.
One more on the arms sale real quick. Is there any concern about Bahrain's use, and again, external to Bahrain, use of any of that equipment in their mutual defense agreements that they have in the region? For example, when Saudi Arabia sent troops into Bahrain earlier this year, they were used to put down the protests. Is there any concern that if they were to use any of that equipment for a similar purpose in a neighboring country?
Well, we have spoken about this before, Kirit, when we talked about on the day that we notified. Whenever we do an arms sale, we also have to negotiate an end-user agreement. So that has yet to be done in the Bahrain case with regard to these sales, and that allows us, in cases all around the world, to be able to go back if we feel that equipment that we have sold is not being used for purpose, to go back and have those conversations with the government. So one of the things that has not yet happened in this case is to have the end-user conversation, but obviously we're always concerned that the equipment be used for purpose.
But specifically, can you say whether in that agreement you, the United States government, would like to have some assurance from the Bahrainis about that specific point?
As I said, this equipment is being sold for external defense. I'm not going to get into the details or the specifics of chapter and verse of what we're going to ask for, but the end-user conversation we have to have will be about ensuring that that is in fact the use.
Does the U.S. trust Bahrain to do the right thing, to live up to its promises, to follow what's in the Commission report, and then to actually implement the changes? Does the U.S. trust Bahrain? I mean, this seems to be a case of there's not some trust there.
We supported the establishment of this commission, which is the first time Bahrain has done such a thing. We are looking to see a high-quality report from the commission, a transparent process. We're also looking to see the government of Bahrain act on and implement the recommendations and the findings of the commission. So that's the conversation that we had today.
I just wonder if this external defense element really has much meaning at a time when Syria is committing abuses against foreign conspirators, in its own words. Bahrain was fighting Iranian-backed revolt, in its view. Libya the same. It seems that in a lot of these countries in tumult, the argument is constantly being made that it's foreign elements that are trying to stir up trouble. So these countries would find it justifiable, presumably, to use whatever equipment you're giving them on the notion that it's external defense. Am I wrong?
Well, as you know, we reject the Syrian government's assertions that these weapons that they're turning on their own people are being turned on external provocateurs. Our view is that they're being turned on peaceful protesters. As I said, we have to have an end-user discussion with the Bahrainis. We will have that end-user discussion. You know why we feel that this sale should have been notified. It's about external defense. So obviously those are the kinds of reassurances you look for in an end-user conversation.
But earlier
I'm
this
not going to
year,
go further than that, though, because it's the Department of Defense's
okay, we're
deal.
going back, not
Yeah.
further. Earlier this year, when Bahrain used force to quell protests, that was, in their view, an external issue. Would the U.S. have disagreed?
Brad, we're now parsing this thing as finely as sausage here. I think I've covered where we are on this issue with Bahrain. Please, Jill.
I don't know whether you've had a chance